right. Well, we are at 12:01. I see the list of participants growing, so why don't we kick it off? For those in attendance this afternoon, thank you very much. This is the essential pillars for generative AI success. AI agents powered by data and security. My name is Jeff Craddy. I am the VP of Cloud and Innovation here at Blue Mantis. And to my fellow panelists, I would ask you to introduce yourself. Maybe we can start with Tim.
Yeah, Tim Walton. I'm from Microsoft. I'm head of capability and capacity for AI in the global partner solutions area. I focus obviously on AI, specifically Azure AI, and helping our partners adopt AI and innovation. Great to be here.
Thank you, Tim. John.
Yeah, hey, and thanks and welcome everybody. I'm John Treadway. I'm the CEO and co-founder of AI Technology Partners. We are a Blue Mantis partner, and we provide custom, secure, generative AI solutions to Blue Mantis's clients.
Thank you. And Chris?
Hello, everyone. Chris Moyer, currently VP of Data Enablement at Blue Mantis. For some of the folks that I may or may not know on the call, we came from a company called SME Solutions Group, a 14-year-old company. Back in October of last year, we're acquired by Blue Mantis. And now I'm leading up everything data enablement and analytics and AI. Appreciate being on the call.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you for joining today and sharing your insights with our attendees. For those folks who were with us last year, we did a session similar, as AI was starting to make its way into mainstream in the world about a year ago. And a ton has absolutely changed since then. We've seen everything from launching competitive AI models, to outrageous claims later debunked through good, diligence. And really today, what we're hoping the audience gets to take away with this is, us sharing a lot of the learnings and the experiences of places where we've seen customers be successful. Additionally, Microsoft Copilot has proven really to be the gateway into generative AI. And as you move along that growth model, we've seen uptake on custom AI solutions. And today, what we'd love to do is give you a holistic perspective on your AI journey. So I'm going to kick it off with the first question. Tim, this one is going to be for you. And, in your role at Microsoft, you have a pretty wide view across the industry and what's happening. And so maybe you can tell us, when it comes to adopting AI, why is it important about, starting small, focusing on getting some of those quick wins? And then how do you stay aligned to the business as the driver for your AI adoption right from the start?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think starting off with very quick wins, and to your point, Jeff, it has to have a business outcome. So what we've discovered of doing thousands of these different AI projects is there are certain use cases that drive a specific ROI. And they tend to be less risky because we've seen them over and over again. So doing those types of projects where there's potentially, right, Jeff, a low lift, a light lift, and potentially using a partner, for sure, getting those AI solutions out is important. I think also you've got to look at the customer and the business, right? You need to know from the customer's perspective what those business outcomes are that align to perhaps their mission statement, or maybe you look at their 10K or whatever. It must align to their business. And then you look at those high yield use cases and start to help them implement that. That doesn't necessarily mean like they're not custom, because it's their data that actually gives the customer the differentiated value proposition. The other thing that we absolutely understand at Microsoft is you've got to embrace AI now, right? You have to do that and go what we call a frontier customer and push the boundaries on AI. You have to do that now, and you have to have that strong leadership at the customer with an executive sponsorship to drive that innovation through the organization. Now, from an IT perspective, what is absolutely clear, right, Jeff, to your point when you said security, if you think about governance, risk, and compliance, IT plays a huge role in sort of landing that secure foundation that they can get all the value out of AI. And you need to look at it holistically, right, Jeff? There's custom solutions, what we call bending the curve of AI, and you do that in Azure. You may be sort of creating your own custom model, right? And then there's other things that you can do that are just, you're utilizing Copilot, right? And utilizing that in your internal business and speeding up that business. From no code to low code to pro code, there is so much value to do that. And so you have to do it in a holistic manner with that executive sponsorship. So, and then finally, what I would say, Jeff, to Blue Mantis is there's a lot of partners out there, system integrators, have deep knowledge of these use cases that resonate with our customers, and you're not alone, right? If you need to do these custom AI solutions, I would utilize a partnership and external entities to help you do that. Some partners like Blue Mantis have done this hundreds of times this year, right, at different customers, so that they have that experience and they can sort of mentor you on that innovation journey. So that's a few of the things that I've seen really over the last year. Does that help, Jeff?
Yeah, excellent. One of the things that stuck with me when you were answering, Tim, was, alignment back to the business and making sure that you had that, executive sponsor champion. Maybe you could just tell me from your experience, why is that so critical? And John, Chris, please chime in on what you're seeing as well.
Yeah, we introduced something a few years ago, what we call the Microsoft customer methodology. And in that, we always want a business outcome, right, Jeff? And as a platform company, it's very difficult to sort of say that because we're focused on the platform. But we always have to look at that business outcome, and then you've got to sort of prioritize that with its risk, etc., and driving that value. And so normally that's done with a workshop with a partner to sort of tease out what those use cases are, and having the right people in the room, whether it's somebody from HR, from sales, or finance, right? And you can actually hone in on what those use cases are. It's really important to have the perspective of the business, and they're better able to identify what the KPIs and OKRs are for how you can measure, did I really get that outcome, right? Because ultimately, you're going to be spending some effort to do that, and you want to be getting an outcome. So it's critically important, and we really look to partners to deliver that, right?
Mm.
Yeah. Jeff, I'll add in there. I think the one approach, right, we're always trying to support not only the business outcomes and issues, but also a customer's IT, right? So we try to look at collaboration between both parties and make sure that there's full holistic customer success, right? We have to please IT, we have to please the business, and then we also, of course, have to please executive leadership, potentially shareholders, right? So everybody's looking to add AI into that platform of theirs and be able to speak to it and talk to it. So I think, like Tim had mentioned, getting started could be a crawl, walk, run, could be a very quick crawl, walk, run, right? Back in the old BI days, you still had to kind of ease into things. I think the good part is that a majority of customers do have a foundation that is set up, and it's much quicker for them to start implementing AI into that. While, of course, data governance and trust is still very important, a lot of them are able to get there quicker.
Yeah, great insights. And John, in some of the change management, right, that you've experienced delivering some of these projects, again, just how do you keep them aligned, right? Like, and why is it so important in the early innings here to kind of keep that going?
There's always an issue in any organization, right, where you want to promote the idea of experimentation and taking some risks and thinking about what is the art of the possible? What can you actually get done? And the risk is that if you if you choose only one thing and you go all in on it and you're not able to make it successful, it kind of can sour the business on things. So I think our approach is, first off, let's, as Tim said, let's find that low-hanging fruit. Let's find those items. We use kind of a 2x2 grid format, which is the cost of or difficulty of implementation and the business value or ROI that you can get out of that. And we go through, kind of exhaustively with our clients and break that down into those 4 quadrants, if you will. And obviously, we want to look for those things that have high impact and low cost and low risk to deliver as our first keys. But we can't just take one, right? You need to take a few steps here and see where the value is, and then continue to kind of invest and grow and double down on that. So we'll always recommend kind of a portfolio approach. That doesn't mean that you have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, but it does mean that you need to think about this as, I'm not going to just do one thing, right? If all I do is just give all of my employees something like a Copilot and just, hope they use it, that's not going to be a successful outcome. So we have to really drive into those use cases. One of the ways that we look at this is that there's kind of two dimensions. We should put intelligence in everybody's fingers, Copilot or whatever, right? That everybody should have access to that, because it's like having Word or Excel or PowerPoint or email. You're not going to go backwards and do it the way that you did it before we had those things. And you're not going to go backwards and not use AI anymore. So I think that's really critical. But the real ROI that you start to see, kind of the real business value, is at a use case, at a business process, at a functional, at a specific specific process where I can say, this is my pain here. How do I address that pain with generative AI? What is the value that I can get out of that? What's the effort that it's going to take? And how quickly can I start to see that value? And so we really dive into that pretty deeply and get that approach. I did want to jump on something else that Tim said as well, which I really appreciated your comments, Tim. I think that was a great intro to this topic, which is, a lot of the people that might be on this call might be IT leaders. Maybe there's some business leaders here as well. If you're an IT leader, right, I highly recommend that you don't try to be the gatekeeper between whoever it is that you're bringing in and your executive team. Let us, if it's us or somebody else, let us actually be the enablement to help you. If you want the biggest budget, right, if you want to have the most fun and get the most learning for your organization, and you're going to be in charge of security and compliance and risk, as was pointed out, you need to bring us in and have us engage directly with the business leaders, because that conversation that I just had, that 2x2 matrix, I'm not going to do that with you. I'm going to do that with your business leaders, right? It's going to be a lot more successful, and you can do it, and they're going to trust you, but we're going to go a lot further, a lot faster if we can do this directly.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, John. IT is critically important, right? Like you said, they're probably going to use AI. You want them to use AI in the organization, whatever it may be, let's say Copilot, you want to use it in a very secure way, right, John? And I think IT, as you said, it enables the business to drive that innovation. So helping IT, secure that foundation and think about risk and compliance is absolutely critical. And it's something that you need to spend time on and evolve, right? As you said, John, right? You'll do some projects and you'll evolve whatever that strategy is for securing the foundation as you go along. And I think it's important to see that in a holistic way, right? Both from an IT perspective and the business perspective.
Yeah, I want to bring Chris in on this because one of the core roles of IT is the custodian of the data, right? And the data security and protection and all of that goes into that. And so the InfoSec team and the data teams and the privacy teams, absolutely critical in that process, right? And we talk about, you can do things in parallel, right? And so I want to turn this over to Chris here, but one thing is there's things I can move fast on without spending a lot of time fixing up everything in my data estate, which is, there's a lot there. But some of the long-term high-level benefit is I need to have a consistent and clean and secure way to access company data in order to provide that to the generative AI to get those use cases really, really fleshed out. I don't know, Chris, if you have more that you want to say about that.
Yeah, no, appreciate that, John. Yeah, so, and I'm sure Jeff has some questions, but I'll jump right on that. So for those that don't know much about our organization previously, and now, like I mentioned, we're basically running the data enablement AI practice for Blue Mantis. We were a company that focused very much on data governance, data strategy. Of course, we rolled all that up with storage and processing and things of that nature. But the visualization piece on the end, the reporting. But where we really became a successful organization was taking the soft and process skills along with the technical skills and building up really great data governance systems for our customers to make sure, like I said, whether it's standard BI or analytics, which we've been doing for years now, and just rolling that into the AI approach to things, you still need a good foundation and good data. So incorporating proper testing, QA, QC practices, things of that nature. That is where we've seen the most success, which is the companies that take that very serious first. At the end of the day, we're all trying to make data-driven decisions, right? But you want to make sure that, while AI, artificial intelligence is artificial, we want to make sure that the data is official, right? And that everybody is feeling extremely confident that their business outcomes and the way that they're trying to execute business requirements and needs is backed by a really good data model, right? So that's where we've really focused over the years, and it certainly helps that we've been a Microsoft Gold Analytics provider for about 7, maybe going on 8 years now. And when we did the acquisition with Blue Mantis, them being a very focused Microsoft partner was a great fit, right? So a lot of governance stuff around Purview and other areas like that. So it's been a great match.
Yeah, it certainly has been. I want to pick apart a little bit of a more finer point. And John, this one's going to be for you. So, I'm certain that everyone in the audience has either experimented with some flavor of generative AI, right? Like, I mean, I don't know which one it could be, or the use case in particular, but a lot of people are, going out and finding their own thing, and they're using it, and they're uploading data. Maybe they're not. They don't know any better. Some of those use cases and angst have been expressed to a lot of the IT leadership that's in the audience today. And so, you've either rolled this out in a pilot mode, you've experimented, you've tried, you have the use cases. There's so many to enumerate that you're having difficulty picking them. And so now you start asking yourself, hey, look, something off the shelf, while it got me going, it's not going to get me all the way to where I need to be. And if an alternative is something that I can build and own, like in my own custom solution, how do you engage there? Like what do you tell people?
So the first thing is that we believe that everybody should have access to this intelligence, like I said before, right? And restricting it to just a certain number of users, right? Oh, I've only rolled out Copilot to my top 100 executives out of a 3,000 person firm, right? There's a lot of money, and I got to do that. That's just going to kill you, right? Because two things that are happening. First off, it's not like your team's not using generative AI. They're just not using generative AI that you're governing, right? They're using it anyway. They're probably using free versions. If they're paying for it themselves, good on them, because at least they're protecting your data a little bit more, but you have no visibility and observability into what they're doing. So what we focus on is building solutions that are deployed. We deploy in Azure, in your Azure environment, locked down in your tenant, locked down to your data, locked your security. We're using advanced Azure AI platform capabilities and the models, right? And if you want to use the most secure way to get at generative AI models is using the Azure OpenAI model set. It's got the highest level of protections and everything else. So we kind of go after that, right? Which is, let's build these solutions. Let's do it inside your Microsoft tenant. Let's get you access to your data, your SharePoint, and not all SharePoint, just the SharePoint that we specifically say you should get access to, because We don't want to turn on graph access to every piece of data out there because, as we know, that's a huge security risk. And I can go and I can tell you that can't tell you the number of times that I've gone into a client and gone to Copilot and said, hey, tell me about some contract, and I've been able to find it. So yeah, in any event, our goal is to get into these very custom solutions. And let me give you a specific example of a custom solution that we're talking about here. What does that mean, right? We're talking about AI agents and agentic solutions and custom success, right? A custom generative AI success. So think about, like, I'll take the sales process. Everybody's got a selling process. I need to do RFP responses. Can I have a system that will take all of my data, know all about my business, and generate responses to an RFP very quickly? The answer is yes. Generative AI is really good at that. Another example might be incident management. How do I correlate all the things that are going on? And I don't need a mathematical machine learning approach. What I need to know is, when have I seen this before, and how did I fix it, right? Not how do I predict it's going to happen next, but how do I fix it because I've seen this before? And being the expert that knows everything about all of your business, all of your incidents, all of your IT environment, and how you've had things deployed. Those are just two examples, and there's just so many of them. So it's really the approach starts with, what's the pain? Where can we solve that pain point? And then looking at, how do I construct a custom solution that may or may not be agentic out of the gate, but eventually is going to take on more agentic capability to solve these problems and generate that ROI?
Yeah, I haven't been, bashful about the fact that I think that the Microsoft approach here, to keep this within the bounded context of the tenant and the digital perimeter, keeping your data secure and only for your use, is brilliant. I mean, Tim, is that sort of lowering the barrier to entry, let's say, to a lot of the customers that you're dealing with?
Yeah, I think it addresses a lot of the concerns from a security, the governance, risk, and compliance. Absolutely. It's fascinating, like when we see the adoption of things like Copilot and Azure OpenAI, right, John? We actually see their M365 secure score and the Azure secure score all go up, right? So like to Chris's point, like you got to secure the data, you got to make sure that you understand it. And that is where IT adds huge value. And they can actually show that value, right, to the stakeholders, right? We improved the score. And that's sort of a fascinating thing that we see that most customers go through. I see actually there's a question. Maybe somebody else has got something to add on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was looking at the questions.
All right, sure. Let's go to the questions. So the conversation seems to be very Microsoft focused, but our business uses some Microsoft and some not. How do we start bringing AI into our back end and shop floor without messing up security or data rules across the platforms? Panel?
Do you want the Microsoft guy to respond to that?
Well, let's get Chris to start on that one, and then yeah. I have a specific thing because there's some recent actually announcement from Microsoft that I think is relevant here that I think could be interesting.
Sure. So, well, the one thing that's maybe good for that question, and I'm not sure if the individual said the other non-Microsoft platform or systems that they're using, but again, since we're just data enablement as a focus, we work with a lot of different platforms. Obviously our Microsoft partners with Snowflake, Click, ThoughtSpot, a lot of different systems. So really, it does not matter the solution or products that you have. At the end of the day, it's data, it's governance around that, and whether or not it's in Copilot or ChatGPT or anything else that's out there. Our focus is just ensuring that the data quality, data trust is set up and in place for when those business users are starting to actually utilize AI technology.
Yeah, I think that's right, Chris. And yeah, this is kind of a Microsoft focused discussion. Obviously, we've got Microsoft on here and all of this, but think about where most enterprises, the bulk of the data that generative AI can really touch is. It's in SharePoint, it's in OneDrive, it's in your email, it's in your Teams, and your messages and your channels and all of that. So we start there, right? But data has gravity, as you've heard many times before. I'm sure that's not a new piece of information. And if you're creating a whole bunch of data that you'd like to have access to in generative AI, and that data is running in a different cloud or it's running on-prem, then that means that's where you should run the model, right? And so there are many open source models, there are many commercial source models, there's Mistral, there's Cohere, there's others that we can deploy against your data wherever it might be, whether it's in Microsoft or whether that data is somewhere else. But you want to run the model and do the inference closer to the data, because otherwise you're spending a lot of time and energy kind of moving a lot of data across the wire, and that's not really needed. One of the things that's really interesting, just came out actually in the last few days, as a new capability in Azure AI Search, right? So we're talking about data and security, right? The number one issue that we have typically in these things is I've vectorized a bunch of data. I've copied it from where it is, and I've put it into an AI format, which is called vectors, and I've made that available to a generative AI model. And somewhere along the way, I've lost all of the security and permissions on that data. So if I have a bunch of files where the security should be just locked down to one user, right, or just 5 users, right? How do you guarantee that in a search, if I'm asking the AI application questions, that I'm not returning data to a user that shouldn't see that data? And Azure AI Search, they just added full enforcement of permissions. So as long as you pass through the user's Entra ID, it'll tell you whether or not they're allowed to see something. So the query will actually come back the right way. That's a highly useful capability and feature, right? So there's, that's something where we can move really quickly, and we can provide lots of kind of fine-grained access control security, even from search results that are referencing data that, might be sitting back on SharePoint. So it's pretty, there's 2 parts of this. Is we can run the models, we can run against models that are running anywhere. Our default baseline position is that we run in Microsoft, because that's where the bulk of your non-structured data is likely to be sitting.
Yeah, and I would say, John, it's clear, right? All the data is not going to be in Microsoft, right? Shop floor as the indication. Like a lot of our retail customers, right? They're not all going to be in the cloud, right? It's going to be dispersed, be on the shop floor, etc. And so that's why we really focused on technologies like Arc to be able to enable those machines and be able to push models down, and different models, non-generative models perhaps, to that shop floor if it's manufacturing or it's retail, etc. So we really focused on that. The other thing that we did with Fabric was, yeah, the data is not all going to be there, right? So we can actually pull in data from, if you're on Google or you're on Amazon, etc., other data sources, you can sort of pull in that data. And then, as you said, John, and I think the next question, through Purview, begin to understand and the governance around that data. I think ultimately on most businesses, it's going to be a hybrid, right? And we've really focused on that with Azure Arc. I think Azure Foundry is now available locally, so that's very interesting, right? And I think you'll continue to see that, right? Especially for those customers where it's just not possible for everything to be in the cloud.
Yeah.
Jeff, I'll just tack on a couple things there too. Yeah, and John was kind of getting on it, but just like we would solidify via Active Directory, which departments or individuals could see certain data in the old BI school. It's similar. So there is governance and there is security and structure that can be easily put into place. The other thing too is we're talking about some use cases and things now, and I think the key is the folks that are on this call from different organizations, different vertical industries. The cool thing that we're putting in place is a lot of proof of concepts and things around really horizontal proof use cases, right? So it could be marketing focused, could be finance focused, and then having industry specific stuff. We do everything from healthcare to financial services to manufacturing to energy and utility. So it is certainly being used by all different organizations.
Yeah, definitely. Very interesting time, and not just in the technology swim lane within companies, come from all sides.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so we got another question. This looks like a good one. So we're currently rolling out Copilot and have been going through the data governance via purview, sensitivity labels, DLP, etc. However, we are starting to review Azure Cognitive Services, custom vision, and anomaly detectors. And so for folks in the audience, will this touch AI or non-generative AI? Those are not generative AI, which is kind of what we're talking about today. But Tim, you have any insights on the cognitive services that are rolling out with Microsoft?
Yeah, I think, when I think about that, it's a great question, right? And there's actually a lot of use cases where it's non-generative, right? I actually sometimes I say AI, it should be innovation, right? And just clearly state that, right? If you look at like a manufacturing company, I'm here in Tampa, Florida, and if you look at Jabil, right, they're using non-generative AI, right, for anomaly detection to improve their manufacturing supply. So absolutely. And then that is definitely going to be a hybrid solution as we just discussed before. So you've really got to look at the use case and what model you should be using, right? Or what AI you should be using. We actually introduced, I think, at Build, the model router. So actually AI helps you identify which model it should actually go to, which is sort of fascinating. But absolutely, I think I like this question by Richard. You should be really thinking it. That's what I said at the beginning, holistically, right? What can you use to in your business for a business outcome that actually gives you innovation? It may be to Chris's point, right? That it could be just analytics. We get real-time analytics to see, and then maybe push it through AI in the next step. But like we can see there's a specific slowdown in our supply chain because of X, Y, and Z. Getting that data to flow through is really critical. And so I like the idea of just innovation, right? Because it could be process automation, right, John? It could be that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I mean, this question, it's interesting. I mean, the core topic here is generative, not machine learning and other AI capabilities. But we often see them side by side in solutions. The incident management solution that I mentioned before, right? You want predictive analytics in there. You want to be able to know when something's about to fail. You need to do statistical analysis. You need to understand anomaly detection and all of that. And if you're in a manufacturing environment or in some other environment, facilities or whatever, where you might have a vision requirement. And then how do you alert that? How do you interpret that? How do you turn that? Because that's generating more data. Right? That's taking data and generating an intermediate form of data, which is, some kind of an alert or some kind of a setting, or I've hit a certain threshold. Now I want to turn that into something that people can act on. I need to turn it into a narrative, right? And generative AI is amazing for that, right? So you put those together and they end up in pretty good shape. So anyway, it's an interesting topic, and I think that as a rule, the vast majority of the energy and effort in the market right now is focused on the generative AI side, but we can't forget the fact that machine learning and vision and other kind of parts of the cognitive services portfolio have been around for a while, right? They're more specific in their use cases and they're more specific in their application than the broadly capable generative AI. But I do think that they layer in together, and when you get into those use cases where you have enough data to make statistically valid inferences through these machine learning techniques, then those can be really powerful.
Yep. Yeah, totally agree. And it keeps coming back to a central theme for me. And Chris, I think this is something you probably, eat, breathe, and sleep every day. The integrity of the data. If generative AI is a solution today, there's machine learning experiments to be had in the future. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't the most tidy with every piece of data that I ever created. I certainly wasn't, aware 10 years ago that everybody in my company may have unfettered access to it. Like, if I needed to profile something to say, hey, look over my data, parse it, maybe visualize it for me, are you getting a lot of requests like that now?
Yeah, no, I would say our starting point is what we refer to as a phase zero, which is really just coming in, understanding the stack that the client has. Simple things like looking at duplicate data, looking at things that we could clean up and fix. We all talk about garbage in, garbage out, but at the end of the day, you're not just trying to put whipped cream on the garbage, right? Like you want to make sure that it is a long-term solution, and investing in that cleanup on the front end is just where we've seen AI implementations be more successful. You want people to be able to trust the data and the information that's going out. You certainly don't want folks making data-driven decisions on it if it's not. So that is, we're just seeing that as like a really core key concept, because you really only get one or two attempts, and then if it's causing more harm than positive solutions, people may not corral around it, right? They may have some concerns that they're just not going to do their jobs properly, or it's not going to help them. So yeah, the data governance piece, Jeff, and I feel like you're right, it's been a little common theme here, but that is important for the long term, and that's what we've helped out with a lot. I always say I feel like we've been doing AI for the last 14 years as an organization, because it was everything around business intelligence and analytics, and it all started to change. Now it's just so fast, right? A lot of times we were developing these types of predictive solutions and things like that. Now it's just super fast. So, but it's really cool stuff. It's fascinating, and everybody enjoys it.
I think one of the things that we've been talking about in a lot of this context, right, is if I were to kind of wrapper it, right, there's a bunch of enterprise concerns, right? It's very easy for me to get an API key to a model and then go ahead and build something, right? I can build something pretty quick. I can throw data at it. I can do stuff. But then if I want to put it into production, right, what are my enterprise architecture requirements? What are my standards? How do I build this in a way that scales? Like Tim just brought up another thing that was announced at Build, right, which is the model router, which is an attempt to kind of get a little control over the craziness that is all of the generative AI models out there. When do I use 4.0? When do I use 4.1? When do you use 4.5, 0.3, 0.3 mini, 0.4 mini, vision, this, that, like all these different models. And that's just the OpenAI family. Then there's all the Google family. Then there's all the, everybody else's family of models. And it gets to be crazy. And as a user, so there's two sides. As a developer, I want a lot of control, right? If I'm building a specific solution, I want to specify the model, I want to specify the settings, I want to specify all of the parameters of that model, and I want to test and test and test until I've optimized it. In a general purpose use case of generative AI, as a user, I don't want to think about that. I don't want to select what model I want to go to. I want to tell you what I want to get done, and I want you to give it back to me. So model routing can be really valuable in that context. But we even go kind of a step further, right? So when we deploy things, we think about what's the governance layer around these access to these models. And we can use in the solutions that we're building the same technique we can give to the developers within an organization. So we'll put up, Azure API Manager and the AI Gateway capabilities, and we'll have, caching of results, right? Semantic caching is what it's called, which means that I don't have to go back to the model for every question when everybody in the organization asks the same question over and over. Why do I have to pay for that question to get answered 100 times? Why don't I have that question answered once and cached, and then I can get that answer for everybody? So there's a lot of enterprise things that we need to do to lock it down, to make sure that the security is there, to make sure that it's robust, to make sure that it's operable and governable and all of that. And that's a big kind of piece that we focus on here. And I think Richard, Richard had another question for you, Chris, I think, around dealing with data in shared drives and SharePoint, right? It's a mess out there. Nobody has a good handle on that.
Was that a question, John? How are we?
Yeah, that was a question. How do you? Well, so it's really a question from Richard Vieira here, which is how are companies handling that stale and dead data that's sitting in shared drives? And I'll just let me put something aside here. when we're building things, we always focus on less is more, right? The least amount of high quality data will give you the best results. If you have access and you turn it on to SharePoint and you have access to all of the versions of all of the documents that go back 7 years, right? And you ask it a question, it may pull up a reference and actually give you the answer from an outdated and stale piece of documentation. So one of the things we first do is for everything, we collate and correlate the data, and we make sure that, or curate it is probably the right term. We curate the data, make sure that the data is current, it's the most accurate, up to date, and the minimum amount of data that you need to get access to. Throwing tens of thousands of files at a model sounds great because I can see everything, but those files are in many cases outdated and stale. But how do you solve the problem of stale and dead data that's in shared drives and SharePoint?
Yeah, I think it's a separate project, honestly, that customers need to focus time and obviously some funds on. We have some customers that implemented a spring data cleanup kind of a process. So as they're and you could pick any season, right, any quarter, but as you're getting more information, you're right. You don't want to be incorporating something from 5 or 7 or 10 years old into the Q&A that you're trying to get out of your AI platforms. So it's really a proactive approach on making sure that you are doing data cleanup properly. That's why I said it's kind of a process.
Yeah, and we point to solutions that, give me a golden folder of the, your service descriptions and product descriptions. Give me a golden folder of your HR policies. Give me a golden folder of your IT policies and procedures. Don't give me the directory that has every previous version going back, for the last 10, 15 years. I don't want that. All I want is a golden folder of the stuff that really matters. And so it takes a little bit of curation up front. It's actually it's actually the hardest part of our projects because it's not a technical challenge. It's getting people to do a little bit of work to actually get that data into the right place. And it's kind of time consuming. I think the comment about we're doing purview and we're doing data sensitivity labeling and doing all of that. That's a hard project. And I have a lot of sympathy for the people that are doing that because it's like herding cats and pushing string and whatever other analogy you want to have about something that's really difficult, highly valuable, but nobody wants to do it. Right. So, data cleanup is tough. It's a pain. Right.
Yeah, and John, I could attest to this. So they did this at Microsoft, right? Like we've got the Secure Futures Initiative, right? And it was all about cleanup. And what they did was you could see they basically went through with retention and deletion policies, right, on everything, including Teams, etc. Right? If you weren't in there and you weren't utilizing it, it's going to tell you, do you really still need this? And through those policies, that's sort of the way it went, and not just specifically for M365. Right now, it's a totally different thing, right, Chris? When we start to look at data, and maybe it's more traditional OLTP, that can be very difficult. But that is definitely something that you want to be doing, right? It's setting up those retention policies. There's certain things I think like inside of risk management inside of M365, you can sort of see oversharing of stuff and perhaps a data that is being shared and really shouldn't be, right? Like every time I share data now within Microsoft, I have to put like a date time frame on it. That's what they've enabled me to do. And I still can get my work done, but I'm doing it in a responsible way. And then that goes back to what you were saying, John, like the IT empowers customers to do that innovation, and that is got to be your focus is if you're in the IT department, right, is to make that as seamless as possible and have a really good strategy, holistic strategy for adopting AI.
All right,
you guys, I mean, think of it, you have organizations that have attempted to go paperless, but what did they have prior to doing that, right? They had shredding policies, and they'd have those trucks come in every once in a while. I think with keeping data just in your platform, you should have the same processes in place where there is someone dedicated to ensuring that stuff is being cleaned up.
Yeah,
completely. All right, well, gentlemen, we have reached time for our session together today. I'd like to thank all of you. This was riveting for me. Hopefully our audience got some good takeaways. If in fact, for anyone in the audience, if you did hear anything that is interesting and compelling and you'd like a follow-up, please reach out to us and we can get you in contact with anybody you saw here today. So thank you all, gentlemen, very much, and thank you to the audience.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you,
All right.
everyone. Good
Thanks,
job,
team.
Jeff. Thanks, bye.
Afternoon.